Imagine this crime scene. There's a dead body that's found in the back of a four-door Explorer in a small parking lot. There are bystanders all around, and evidence is shown all around the car. Thinking from a law enforcement perspective, what would you do in order to ensure that the crime scene was secure and that evidence was preserved? According to Mike Ward, a former forensic analysis from the Frankfurt State Forensic Lab, the first and most important thing you should do at a crime scene is ensure safety. This includes providing medical care and apprehending and identifying the suspect. In this specific case I'm going to talk about, there's no medical care needed since the victim of the crime was already deceased, and apprehending or identifying the suspect will be impossible because there were no witnesses. The next thing you would want to do is secure the scene by placing crime scene tape and regulating the personnel allowed onto the actual crime scene. In this case, since it occurred in a small parking lot, officers would most likely tape off the parking lot as a whole, and personnel that you would see at this type of scene would be a coroner, police officers, detectives, evidence collection, and forensic analysis. The next most important thing to do, according to forensicsciences.org, is take photos and sketches of the scene as a whole and of individual evidence. Once you've taken photos, you are going to search the scene. There are many different ways to do this, but the most common including grid searching, which means you search the scene horizontally and vertically. Then there's parallel search, where you search either horizontally or vertically, and then zone searching, where you break up the scene into different parts, and a different law enforcement officer will search each section. This would be most likely for a case like this, since there is a car in the center of the field of evidence. After evidence is found, you would mark it using evidence markers so that they can come back and take photos of the individual evidence and then collect it. So next is to collect the evidence. According to Hochschild, which is the writer of the Fundamentals of Forensic Science, there are three main types of evidence, which include organic, inorganic, and fire and arson evidence. These types determine how you package them. So organic evidence consists of things such as bodily fluids, plant life, and insects. This would be packaged in paper, and any fluids would want to be dried before you package. Inorganic includes things such as broken glass, shell casings, footprints, things of those nature. And that would, anything that can be packed would want to be packed in plastic, and things that could be sharp want to be wrapped, and you would want to wrap everything separately so that they do not degrade each other. Fire and arson is anything that's been burned or has an accelerant on it. These are packaged in paint cans because they do not want the accelerant to evaporate before actually being able to be tested. These types also determine when you collect the evidence. For example, organic would want to be collected first, then inorganic, and you would want to collect evidence that is subject to the environment first also. So in this case, as you can see, there's organic evidence or blood trails outside of the car, so you collect that first. Then you would move into the car and collect evidence from the blood pool. Then you would go outside the car and collect the broken glass, foot impression, and shell casings, and then inside the car to look for inorganic, but in this case there's none. Fire and arson is a little bit different since most of the evidence is already pretty degraded. They mostly just look for items that have had accelerant poured on it to just ensure that it doesn't evaporate before it can be tested. After all this evidence is collected, it's labeled, and the people who collected it on the scene are documented, which is what they call a chain of custody, or the order in which evidence is handled. This includes who handled it, when, and where a person handled all the evidence. This is really important if you want to use evidence in court, because They require that you have a exact chain of custody to just make sure that no evidence was tampered with or planted. So in conclusion, specific to the scene, if you were to come across this crime scene, you ensure safety. In this case, you don't need to. You would then secure the scene by taping off the parking lot, and then you would regulate personnel. You then document the scene as a whole and individual evidence, and then you would look for evidence using a zone search. Evidence markers would be placed, and then you would collect the evidence going from organic outside to organic inside, then inorganic outside to inorganic inside. Then you would write up a chain of custody, and this is how you would preserve evidence at a crime scene. Even though this is really important for people who are looking for a background or a career in forensics or potentially photographing crime scenes or being a police officer or an analyst, it's still good to know like how you can keep yourself from either degrading evidence or kind of what your role will be at a crime scene. So as a bystander, you wouldn't get to do anything, but you would know that certain steps are taken in order to preserve evidence. Thank you.
So, if you came across a crime scene, do you think you'd panic, or you think you'd be able to follow all the steps?
No, I don't know, I'm pretty calm. It's actually funny.
What was the question?